Major funding for this program is provided by grants from HSH Nordbank and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Allied Partners, Murray Hill Properties, Bank of America, SJP Properties, Greenberg Traurig. Additional funding for this program is made possible by grants from Arbor Realty Trust, BRT Realty Trust, Burden LLP, C.B. Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, McSam Hotel Group, Muss Development LLC, Newmark Knight Frank, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal & Rosenthal Inc., Signature Bank, Sidney Fettner Associates, Studley, Stonehenge Partners, Swig Equities, Extreme Contracting and Deconstruction.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoller, host of the Stoller Report, Real Estate Trends in the Tri-State Region. Times Square. Everybody loves Times Square, and there's so much happening in Times Square in office development. But who's doing it? What's happening? I brought the 800-pound gorilla, the 600-pound gorilla, and probably the 1,100-pound gorilla who's not an owner-developer to talk about what's happening in Times Square. My guests today are Stephen J. Pizicki, Chairman, CEO, and founder of SJP Properties, Douglas Durst, co-president of the Durst Organization, and last but definitely not least, Stephen Siegel, Chairman, Global Brokerage of C.B. Richard Ellis. Douglas, you got a little building being built in Times Square. What's happening? This green building. Tell me a little bit about it.
It's only partially in Times Square. It's a big building.
Hey,
so
it's Times Square. It's Bryant Park. What's happening? I mean, when you were on my show a couple years ago, you said, "Hey, I don't know if I'm going to build this, but I'm going to probably get $100 a foot." What happened? Tell us about
Did I
this
say
building.
Probably?
No, he was definite. I said he'll get at least 85.
Oh, right.
And he said
Wait
100.
a second. You said 85?
Yes.
That's right. Okay.
I thought I was being optimistic.
Okay,
Douglas
let's talk about the
right
Bank
on.
of America Tower at 1 Bryant Park.
All right. We are now about 85 to 90% enclosed. Concrete will be finished in a couple of weeks. Bank of America is building out their floors and will move in for occupancy May 1st. And the Durst Organization, the other major tenant of the building, will move in sometime towards the end of
So you got
2008.
2.1 million square feet. You got your partner in the building, Bank of America, taking 1.6 million, right?
That's correct.
You got Aiken Gumps taking 200,000 square feet. You have this little hedge fund, Marathon, taking, what, about 90,000 square feet?
I think about 70,000 square feet.
So what do you have left?
We have one floor left to go to be rented.
100% leased. And what's the average rent?
The average rent is, it's not $100, but it's close.
Siegel,
Yes, sir.
did you think this was going to happen?
I did. I have been speaking optimistically about the New York market since a conference
Square.
in Florida.
Don't talk about the New York
Let
market.
me finish. Including Times Square. Where else was the supply for Midtown going to be delivered other than Bryant Park through Times Square to the west? And the supply is there, and the demand has been met, and the buildings are filling up and or are full already.
So what happened? You found your buddy from New Jersey, and you told him about coming to New York City?
No, my friend and client from New Jersey
Friend more, first and foremost.
always more important. Expressed a desire to enter the New York market in the office portion of his business. He is already in New York City developing several high-end luxury condos. And I had been trying for several years to convince the owners of the site at 42nd and 8th to build a spec building Their focus was not on that. It was on banking and other ventures. So I asked them for an opportunity to sell it, and they offered me one opportunity. Pick one buyer. It was coincident with the conversations with Mr. Bozicki about his desire to come to New York, and they, to their credit, acted aggressively and with full financial ability and bought the land.
So, Steve, the Jersey kid is in New York, and what are you building at 11 Times Square?
It's a 40-story, 1,000,001 square foot complex. It has 55,000 feet of retail at the base. It's the last site in Times Square, the Western Gateway. Like Douglas, it's going to be a green building. So they will be two of the most technologically advanced buildings in New York. Both from security standpoint, from a LEED certified green standpoint, and from
For my audience,
the technology.
green means what? I know what it means, but I want both of you. He's like Mr. Green.
He's
okay?
Mr. Green. Well, I'll defer the green definition to Douglas.
Okay, well, what's a green building, Douglas?
It's quite an evolution.
When we started in 1995, building 4 Times Square,
Which was the first building in Times Square.
we were working with Dan Tishman and Bob Fox and Bruce Fowl. All of us were environmentalists. We all decided we wanted to build a green building, but nobody knew what it meant at that scale. We've come to realize that what we're really talking about are buildings that are very efficient not just in the sense of operating, but efficient for the users, efficient for the materials that they use, and that they are intelligently designed. The easiest way to build a building is to build it the way you built the last one. You know what the mistakes are. They're very expensive to build buildings, so you want to make as few mistakes as possible. We actually try and do it differently, build a better building than we built last time, and make new mistakes rather than making the same mistakes over again. But we realized it's really about how you build the building. A green building is building an intelligent building rather than building what you built last time.
You know, prior to the show, you had mentioned, I asked both of you about parking. And you said neither way. You said you don't need a parking lot because you're right across the street from the Port Authority, which is a gigantic parking lot. Now, you said there are bike spots?
Part of your credits for LEED certification is if you provide bike racks and showers for the tenants.
Non-carbon emitting transportation.
Right. So we also have plugs for electric cars in our small garage that we're building. So I think what Douglas says today, we've been building buildings for 25 years, and you always strive to improve. What were lesson learned on the last building? How can you improve it? But this time and period in time offers a great opportunity to advance these buildings to a point which is not been achieved in the past. The interesting thing is, if you look at someone that you're going to hire to manage a building 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the average building in New York is 50 years old. So, if you look, they're fairly straightforward, fairly simple. Now you introduce the security, you introduce the green aspects, you introduce the technology that's available today. The elevatoring, destination elevators are a common thing that's almost a requirement in a new building.
For security purposes.
For security purposes, for moving the people quicker through the process, for it being a more efficient process. We have a big lobby, 6,000 feet. It's going to feel like a whole, concierge experience, almost like walking into a hotel with good service. So those things all have to be part of a new building today.
And Douglas, on both buildings. Okay, you had Condé Nast and you had the law firm in 4 when you built that. Bank of America, you had Bank of America as a partner and a lead tenant over here. Steve Pazicki, the kid from New Jersey who's built a lot of buildings, is coming here with 0.
Yes.
I know Siegel's going to lease a lot of it, but
Well, I'm very,
We're going to lease all of it. Not a lot of it.
we're very.
there were other brokers.
No, I
was
meant
gonna say.
no. I didn't mean we personally. We're going to get it leased with brokers' cooperation. We're happy to work with.
We're working with the entire city right now. We've studied these markets for 25 years before just coming into the city, and we have never seen the markets as tight as they are today. Just lack of space, and what we think, both the age of the product in Midtown Manhattan, coupled with the technological advances that you can provide today, coupled with the large floor plates. I mean, there's so few sites left that you can provide a 40,000 foot floor plate for a tenant, and a tenant that's over 300 or 400,000 feet it needs to
But what
not
type
be
of
scattered
tenants?
across.
It's like we were talking part of the show, Stephen, between the BlackBerry when he had time to talk to us. He was saying that on 57th Street, this space has been rented at 40 West 57th Street. Those are hedge funds or others. There's a cachet that they want to be at 450 Park Avenue. They want to be other things. What type of tenants want to move into Times Square? I mean, I know Ernst & Young is over there.
You have Reuters, you have Condé Nast, you have
I
the
agree.
law firm, as
no,
you
but,
referred
but,
to
but
it.
these, okay, but these firms, they took large segments. They took half the building, okay? New York Times building, which is your neighbor next door, they took half of the building, okay? So what do you perceive? I mean, and Douglas, I'm also going to say, how come you didn't buy the site? How come you let the guy from New Jersey buy the site?
Well,
It was too expensive, probably.
I had tried to buy it. I was part of the auction and bid against Howard, which I don't think he ever forgave me.
No, I was going to say, knowing that he would not be in a position to buy it the next
He would
time.
never let you buy it. Okay, so but what type of tenants and what type of rents? I hear that he's achieved over $100, and he started leasing it 2 years ago. You're in the middle of leasing it now. What do we see? I mean, the service industries are strong. There's a vacancy factor lowest ever, right, Steve?
That's correct.
So
And
what,
highest average asking rents ever.
so
But I think, what you have is Midtown Manhattan is diversified. People think, financial services go down the tubes, the New York goes down the tubes. Midtown Manhattan is probably a quarter to third financial services, maybe less than that. So it's got great diversity. The city also has great global diversity. So if the U.S. economy is in trouble, not necessarily that all the businesses in New York are in trouble, because they're doing business on a global basis. So we've been fortunate. We've talked to consumer product companies, we've talked to law firms, we've talked to, pretty much banks across the board.
Entertainment companies.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't a type of company that we haven't talked to. So it's kind of interesting that in a market where we've had a bit of a credit crunch, maybe it took a little air out of the balloon, the economy is softening a bit, but the activity level is still very strong.
I think labeling it and covering it with Times Square was more relevant when he had the guts to announce to the real estate board at a luncheon that he was building a building with or without a tenant. He did not. I want to make that clear. He did not have a tenant. He got Condé Nast.
No. On 4 times, I know he didn't have a tenant.
No.
But then when he was ready to start building,
That
he
was
had a
also when doing something like that on spec in Times Square had a lot of risks, more risk.
Sure.
Still building $1 billion building today is a huge risk on spec, but it's not a question of Times Square anymore. It's delivering quality product in the borough of Manhattan, in a terrific area for transportation, moving labor in and out, in a neighborhood that's going to have, I believe, in the New York Times building, Beachay, as Oriole signed, Douglas does, in his neighborhood, all the fine restaurants, all the facilities and amenities that a client needs to feel comfortable their labor force will be there. And Times Square is now an office market.
Speaking of that, I didn't bring it
Times
up.
Square is it's almost 30 million square feet. It's an enormous office market.
Right.
Since
At
Douglas
one
made his
time
move
they were
Royale.
going. I think it was Lawrence, Rubin, and Vornado were going to build on top of.
Yes, Vornado is still in conversations whether they can reach an agreement with the Port Authority, that makes sense or not, we'll see. But yes, that will be probably
So there'll be another
developable
building.
someday. There'll be another
Absolutely.
billion-foot building.
Absolutely, and 8th Avenue is going to be a spectacular avenue because it's going to be so diversified. It's going to be a 24/7 street.
It's going to be SJP area. I mean, on
It's got
42nd Street we have
condos,
SJP, and on 48th Street we have SJP.
Every
week
corner.
or so, I hear someone else moving,
Yeah.
residentially speaking,
Yes.
to 8th Avenue, 9th Avenue, in the 40s. The office buildings from the northern part of 8th Avenue down that are going to be developed, the apartment buildings, your building, and 2 or 3 other sites that are earmarked for new development. It's going to be a spectacular area to
So it
me.
will be active. You know, it won't be like 6th Avenue at night. Sometimes it gets a little quiet. You know, it's going to have activity 24/7.
You
It's
know-
got tremendous transportation.
Yeah,
We've
yeah.
got a subway stop in the building. We got 12 subway lines. We're across the street from the port. We're one shuttle from Penn Station and Grand Central. So, you know, it's really, that's important. All the tenants want to, how do I get my people there? And then how do I stack them
So
in the floor
there'll be
efficiently?
direct access from the Port Authority underground.
Well, there'll be a stop on 42nd Street, a subway stop in the building, not attached to the lobby.
Let's talk about, we were talking prior to the show that there are other buildings that are one is being marketed on not Times Square, it's further down more near the Columbus Circle area, and then there's a potential other building that Related in Boston is going to do on 44th Street. What do you see happening with all of this other projects going on in the market?
I'm sure that just about anyone we speak to is from a timing perspective, would be talking to Boston Properties' first development on 55th Street as well. I think I think and I know there are enough tenants for both, so they'll get some, we'll get some. And if you take all the proposed supply that's out there, and if you line it up when it's going to be delivered, you're talking about, I think one article in the paper the other day talked about 40 million feet. I use 25 to 30 as being something you can get your arms around. But it's over what could be as long as the 12 to 15-year period in terms of the actual build-out.
Right, but I'm not
That's
talking
nothing
about. I'm not
in terms
talking
of
about
supply.
Hudson Yards. I'm not talking about. I'm really talking about the Midtown. In Midtown right now, it's your new building. Your building is completely one floor is nothing.
Right.
You have the EOP's property across the street from you, whatever we want to call that, which has some space.
There's just about 100,000 feet left.
Right,
in there,
and otherwise we really don't have any space in
And
Midtown.
on delivery, you have 2 Boston property sites, 11 Times Square. You have maybe the Drake. No one knows really what that's going to. Is that going to be office? Is it?
It's too small to make any.
Yeah, and it's not really it. That's your hedge fund 30,000 foot tenant. That's not your competitor for any of the big stuff that these gentlemen are talking about and doing. And there really is nothing else. I mean,
And you're talking about, Michael, Midtown Manhattan can easily, and historically has absorbed 5, 6, 7 million feet without a problem annually. And when Steve talks about this, little bit of space coming on over a 10 or 12 year period, there seems to be a shortage of quality space, and that's why, why we're building a spec building of this size.
But getting to the other buildings in Times Square, you built it spec initially, but your building 4 times has two tenants basically. Ernst & Young is another building which is 1 tenant. Then there's the other building which is across the street.
There's Reuters.
Right.
Reuters is 1 tenant. Okay. Here we're in a little different case. It's the Times building is there. Do you see? I mean, you're serving as advisor, as leasing broker, everything, and you know the market because some of these people. Do you see a variety of smaller firms taking 2 floors, 3 floors, or do you see somebody coming in there saying, "Hey, I want to make a statement," like Bank of America is making a statement with you being your partner, or Reuters, "I want this to be the XYZ
I
building."
think it's more likely that we'll get a 400,000 or 500,000 foot tenant, not necessarily because they want to make a statement, because they need the space, and this is where they'll go, and then it'll be 1 to 3 floor deals after that.
And where are they going to relocate? Because Aiken Gump, who moved into your space, is really relocating from the Plaza District, we would call it, Madison and 57th Street. And somebody would say at one time, "Hey, who was going to move to Times Square?" I mean, wasn't that the case with Worldwide Plaza? when Cravath moved over there. I mean, this was a shock, 20 years ago.
But I think, like Steve said, since then, the market's matured to almost a 30 million square foot market. It's got, entertainment, activity, shows, so it's got transportation. It's got everything that people want in an urban environment to office.
I mean, the retail. I think the Red Lobster and the other restaurants over there are the highest grossing in the country, or perhaps in the world for some of these people. I mean, Gary Barnett's building, which is a block away from your building, the Orion, which I call the Jolly Green Giant, next to the McGraw-Hill building, which was an eyesore. It's completely sold out.
Yes,
I
he
mean,
did very well with that product.
He did very well. Douglas, you were also in the residential. How come you never built residential in Times Square?
We didn't have the sites. If we had the sites, we would have.
So it's like Lower Manhattan. The question is, Times Square becoming a 24/7 residential, retail, office market?
I think it absolutely is, and it performs like that, and certainly the number of condo units that have been built in Times Square and apartment units, it's a staggering amount of construction coupled with the office and the retail.
And just west of Times Square.
Yes.
Right. I mean, Witkoff sold his site on 44th Street and 8th Avenue, which was supposed to be residential, and he sold it to
That's
Weston.
because of the volume cap problems.
No, but it was also Weston made a good deal. Weston
Yes.
felt that there was a need for another hotel. I mean, there was a volume cap also.
But I mean, he wouldn't have sold if he thought he could get the financing, but because they had been talking to Weston for a long time. This is my guess,
Right.
But I think until the 421 disappeared, so to speak, up until then he was going full speed ahead on that.
Yes.
But so, what do we see about rents coming up in the buildings in Times Square? I mean, your property, the other buildings which are going to come on the market, the Worldwide Plaza, Douglas Durst's space that you are vacating a couple blocks away. You're moving in there. What do we see? Are rents going to, with this credit crisis, or as we said, the softening in the market, are they going to stay?
Well, first of all, there is no softening in the market. The credit crisis would only have an impact on this marketplace in terms of softening or not, is if there are...
Stephen, you're not telling me that the leasing activity has slowed down?
There's a trickle here and there of people who have gone on hold or in the financial world or in the hedge fund business, just as they step back, but not that has no material impact on the marketplace. There are at least 4 million square feet of pending transactions that I could name for you right now that are going full speed ahead, and several of them in new buildings in either proposal or negotiation stage, several of them in existing products, both Midtown, Times Square, and downtown. Clearly Gottlieb is going forward with their renewal downtown at a very substantial rent for the downtown market. Ogilvy and Mather's in the market, Gray Advertising, Gibson Dunn. These are all things that hopefully the show airs 6 months from now will be public knowledge.
No, it airs in about 4 weeks, so don't worry about that.
There is a tremendous amount of activity. There are leases being signed. I mean, the show's about Times Square, so I'm not going to take you all over the market.
No, all I want is Times Square. Okay?
But there is not a softening.
This year has been probably one of the better years to date. We see slows downs from month to month. But if you look at this year to date, we've absorbed net over 2 million plus feet. And in a market where there's not a lot of product, that's a pretty good absorption. If that just continues, it should absorb everything that's coming on plus.
What's your thoughts?
I just don't see any product available in Times Square. We have no space in our buildings at 1133, 1155, or 114 West 47th Street.
I mean, the vacancy factor, as Steve said before, is at all-time low. The rents are at all-time high.
The average asking rents are north of $80.
Supply and demand.
The average asking rents are north of $80 a foot, and that's blending in A and B product, and obviously not just Times Square. I would suspect that you can't deliver a new building, new product, for less than $1 billion on 1 million feet, for less than $1,000 a foot today. By the time you buy the land, you got your soft and hard costs of construction and deliverables. You can't rent it for less than 100. So rents have to be, for new product, efficient product, have to be north of 100.
But few people, I remember when you were on the show with Douglas, ever felt that Douglas was going to get the $100 a foot.
No, but I think you're talking a point in time.
I'm talking 3
when
years ago.
average
I'm not-
rents, no,
I-
it's
I'm
more than
talk-
3 years ago we were on the show with Douglas. And I'm saying 85, I thought I was being aggressive. Douglas only said one word, 100. And he was 1,000% on target. But you just look at the fundamentals in this city, and first of all, we're not anywhere near the most expensive city from a rent perspective. London doubles us routinely. There are $200 per square foot rents in London on a net basis.
You know, but I can go to SJP properties in New Jersey and pay $50, but
You
that's
can,
different.
but you'll be alone. Your employees will be here.
I mean,
And we haven't seen the suburbs, the entire ring around Manhattan hasn't seen any move-outs, substantial move-outs
From the city.
from the
It
city
hasn't had
in a
that
big way.
push out has not occurred.
so that, I mean, you own property in Jersey
and
City.
there's so many people in the city that just urban centers are hot.
I mean, Douglas once told me, I said, do you ever go out of the city? He says, if I can't walk it, or, in Manhattan, I don't know anything about it. It's
My
against
father
it.
said he wouldn't buy anything he couldn't walk to.
Right. but
And I said I was lucky. I was lucky that he lived in Midtown Manhattan on 40th.
A lot better than Montana.
right. But you don't see any of the companies who were in New York City running out to the Gold Coast in New Jersey
No,
today?
not only we haven't seen it in the Gold Coast, you're not seeing it big in Long Island, you're not seeing it in Westchester, Connecticut in any big way. And the tenants, even the tenants that you'd look at their margins and say, this is pretty tough for them to be able to pay these rents, they are striving to be in the city. And the employment is in the city, which these people need to follow.
The fundamental shift and divide that moved tenants out of the city to New Jersey, the waterfront and west, and to Connecticut and Stamford, et cetera, has evolved and occurred already over the last 15 or 20 years. The tenants that could divide and take operations of substance out have done it. Your law firms, to a lesser degree, one or two are doing it or thinking of it, but there can be no major moves.
That's correct.
I think having the three of you, maybe with the exception of Siegel, it really gave me and gave my audience a perspective of what's happening in the office market in Times Square. I'd like to thank three guys who've been with me before, Stephen J. Pazicki, Douglas Durst, and Steve Siegel for being here. Next week, we're not going to be in Times Square. We're going down to what's happening in the Bowery and the Lower East Side. See you next week.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you,
Thank
Michael.
you.
Major funding for this program is provided by grants from HSH Nordbank and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Allied Partners, Murray Hill Properties, Bank of America, SJP Properties, Greenberg Traurig. Additional funding for this program is made possible by grants from Arbor Realty Trust, BRT Realty Trust, Burden LLP, C.B. Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, McSam Hotel Group, Musk Development LLC, Newmark Knight Frank, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal & Rosenthal, Inc., Signature Bank, Sidney Fettner Associates, Studley, Stonehenge Partners, Swig Equities, Extreme Contracting and Deconstruction.